everyone. Glad to have you on the call today for today's webinar. Today we're going to be talking about the NSA Centers of Academic Excellence. But before we get into that, just some webinar administration. If you've been on one of our webinars before, you already know the interface with GoToWebinar. If not, we will take questions throughout the webinar, answer them at the end. So there is a questions tab as part of GoToWebinar that you can open up. If it's a question that applies to you personally, I will answer it just directly to you. If it's somebody that would benefit the entire group, or a question that would benefit the whole group, I'll save it till the end and answer it then. We will have a very short survey again at the end of this webinar, just a couple questions about what you thought about the webinar, what additional thoughts or comments you would like to see from us in the future. And so that'll happen after the Q&A. When it closes, it'll launch in a browser. And then, Kyle, if you could click the next slide for me. This webinar is part of our Cybersecurity Month. So it's obviously the month is almost over, but there is still a couple days to enter codes in our cybersecurity challenge. There are some labs from TestOut that you can see on the testout.com/Cybersecurity Month webpage. We're giving out a bunch of grants and gear. The grants won't be given out until after Cybersecurity Month has concluded. We also still have a little bit of gear like Raspberry Pi kits, some networking tools, and more. And there's an extra chance to win if you go to the Cybersecurity Month webpage and scroll down a little bit. There's a section where you can go to the challenges, and if you enter code WEB29K, you get an extra chance towards those grants and gear from joining us today. And then there's a new thing that released this week, which is Cybersecurity Scary Stories on that same page. It's just kind of a comical way to look at cybersecurity flaws or exploits that have happened throughout history. And we have a person here that's got the best scary story voice, so we had him record those for us. So it's just kind of a funny thing you can show to students or colleagues that talk about different cyber attacks throughout history. Now, getting into what we're talking about today, we have Kyle Jones here. He's been very active in training on NSA Centers of Academic Excellence and helping those get through that process. Prior to working in education, he spent 15 years in IT. He has an associate's in network engineering, a bachelor's in business, and a master's in information assurance. One thing I learned about Kyle, he travels very frequently, sounds like almost too frequently, for Sinclair Community College to train other instructors, schools, and organizations on cybersecurity topics, centers of academic excellence, and more. And with that being said, I want to go ahead and turn it over to Kyle so he can tell us everything we need to know. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Adam. I really appreciate it. Yes, and I thank everybody for this opportunity as well, especially TestOut. I don't know if Adam knows this story or not, but when I came to education, I actually started working for a adult ed career tech, and we really didn't have any tools or resources, and we turned to TestOut in about 2014 to start working on stuff, and they've been a great resource and tool. So with that said, I do kind of want to just lay out a few things that we are going to be covering today, kind of like what Adam mentioned before. So like ever since I came into education, the CAE 2Y program, I'll get into the definition here in a little bit, has pretty much been my education life story. When I came to Sinclair and became the chair of the department, the previous chair retired and said, hey, you got to do this thing called a CAE, and I'm moving to Michigan. So I really started looking into it, started seeing how complicated this was, and then I combined actually my master's thesis is written on the importance of community colleges and universities and how they can not only apply for the CAE, but how that impacts their local area. So with that said, we are going to cover what is CAE. Now, I realize that there's probably a lot more than just community colleges on the phone. We have universities and stuff. So I'm going to talk about the definitions, about the CAE 2Y and the CD and all that kind of stuff. We're going to go over help and resources, which was a lot of what I would like to cover today. Starting the process, the program criteria, focused areas, also the programmatic criteria, what you would be doing as an individual center, and what you would need to do as an institution. There's a little bit of a divide there, and that's where I see a lot of schools get tripped up a little bit, because you would be going from everything you would need to put together as a school, all of your educational pieces, and then you have to do your institutional pieces. And then we'll get into why CAE, programs that are coming up, grant opportunities, publicizing things, just kind of getting your name out there. So with that said, the CAE is designated as a part of the NSA and a part of the DHS. So the National Security Administration and the Department of Homeland Security, they jointly sponsor this program that designates an institution. Now, this is a designation based on going through a series of applications, of reviews that designates you as a school and as an individual program. Now, I have the definition up here on the screen, and the definition, gets into the different areas. Kind of what I mentioned before, the 2Y is going away, and it should be fully gone away. I see it pop up here and there a little bit, but the 2Y just was for 2-year education. So just for community colleges, just that 2-year piece. However, a lot of universities that have bachelor degrees were also applying for the same designation of that 2-year piece, but they were a university, so they had 4-year degrees. So then it got kind of convoluted on why there's a separate designation for a 2-year program compared to a 4-year program, if we have to hit all the same issues with the knowledge units. So with that, the Center of Academic Excellence in Cybersecurity and Cyber Defense, as stated before, with our designations, so CAE-CD is Center of Academic Excellence in Cyber Defense. Then there is an R, which is for research, and there's another one for operations. So there's a couple designations that you can have. So with that said, all of this actually goes through the federal government's page. It's the IAD/NIETP. Now, essentially, that's an acronym that consists of other acronyms, and that's something that you kind of have to get used to working with a designation from the federal government. I do kind of find it funny, but if you're at all interested in being a designated institution, this is the page that's got all of your information on it. Again, it's the iad.gov/NIETP page. Also, I'm going to have links and stuff to all of this stuff. I'm going to provide kind of a walkthrough and all that. I just wanted to show this page because this page is just a little frustrating. This page has certain browsers won't let you go there because there's certificate issues, and there's different pages you can go to download the certificates to get into the page. I find that a little frustrating, so I'm just kind of mentioning that out loud, that if you see this page that I'm on, you've hit the actual page that you needed for this. But this specifically is what you would use to do everything, do your designation and all that kind of stuff. So here is a series of links I wanted to share. And I think at the end of this presentation, we're going to send these series of links. I've got quite a few in this presentation because the idea is I want to give everybody as much information as possible, especially if you're redesignating, things have changed. And then 2, if you're looking at designating, you'll want this information. So if you don't already have an account, it would be worthwhile going here and setting up an account just as a very first step. Let's say if you don't even decide to designate for a few years, coming here and setting up an account, it's not going to hurt anything. It'll just kind of get your name on the page. You can start looking at resources and all that kind of stuff. So the links I've provided in here go to the resource pages and requirements. Now, the resource pages and requirements, it gives you all of the information that you'll need to do the program. And also, I have a checklist here. The checklist is for anybody interested, and it kind of gives you an idea if you're meeting even the minimum qualifications to become a designated institution. For instance, you have to have graduates from at least 3 years to be designated as an institution. So let's take, for instance, if you already have a cyber program, but you've only been running it for a year, you won't be able to apply until you show graduates from at least 3 years of your program. Now, that's just one of the many requirements that are out there, but it's still something to think through. So those checklists really help you out. Because kind of like what I mentioned earlier, there's also other institutional programs that you have to do. So, for instance, you institute your entire institution. So therefore, you have to have an institutionally wide security program. So take, for instance, here at Sinclair Community College, we actually have a Chief Information Security Officer, or CISO, and his responsibility is making sure, you know, we have a cyber defense program as an institution. Doesn't really relate to our program and our students and our class graduates from this program, but again, they're designating the institution. So I've seen a lot of great schools not be able to get their designation because they have missed those other institutional pieces. So that's why going through a CAE program application checklist kind of makes sure that you have those preliminary things. Again, in order to get your CAE designation, it is a point system. Therefore, if you don't have the required amount of points, you won't be able to get your designation. And also, some of the points are required. So there's a required series of lists. Now, with that said, with all of this information, there are also other things to help you out with your program. Now, I think the most beneficial thing out there right now is the c5colleges.org. This is a grant that's been given to Whatcom Community College in Washington State. And this essentially gives you a person that's went through the designation, or they're a reviewer, to help you out with your designation. Now, when you look at all of the stuff with the CAE program, it can be very convoluted, and it can be so much information you want to pull your hair out, because essentially that's just all been dumped and poured on you, and you have to filter through it. It's really nice to sign up and go through this program, because you get somebody that's been through it before, and then they kind of come up with a to-do or a checklist. Because if you start trying to hash everything out yourself, it gets very complicated in trying to work on things, build things, you know, like where in the college do I go find this, or where do I find that? They kind of give you a pacing chart to help out with this. Now, it almost took me 1.5 years to redesignate. Sinclair has been a designated college since 2011. However, when we redesignated after 5 years, it's a 5-year program, we basically had to go through everything again. There really wasn't much that we did back in 2011 that helped us redesignate. So this was when we redesignated in 2017. So this was a huge benefit to me, that I had a person assigned to me that reviewed my materials, that reviewed my final documents. I think all said and done, if I was to export my CAE application, I think it's a little over 165 pages. whether just information, because you have syllabuses, you have classwork, and everything that you map things to. So again, that is an amazing resource to have somebody assigned to you that can do all of this stuff, go over all these things with you. So as a part of this C5 program, this picture is a little out of date. I went out trying to find a new one for this presentation just about an hour ago, and I wasn't able to find a nice image for this, so I have links on the side here. What the NSA did, because they're getting such a large group of people trying to designate their schools, last thing I heard is I think there's about 240 some schools currently designated, and there's about 150 in the pipeline. So that's quite a bit of people. I think those numbers, they're rough estimates, but that's kind of what everybody's going through right now. So they broke the country down into different areas. One of the other major resources is our CAE community page. I have another link to that, but on that CAE community page, you can see who in your area is your resource center. So they're called CRRCs, and these resource centers are in general areas. So take, for instance, I'm in Ohio. My resource center is Moraine Valley Community College in Illinois, next to Chicago. So I know that I can reach out to them, I can talk to them. They have meetings where they bring all the CAEs and their areas together, to have regional meetings. It's a great source of people. Also here in Southern Ohio, due to all of this activity in the CAE program, we've actually formed a Cincinnati-Dayton Cyber Corridor project consisting of only CAE schools. I say that generally because some of the schools in the program are currently in the process of their CAE. But we've been working with NIST and the NICE program to be what's called a super cell for all kind of synergistic CAE activity for the region, because we're trying to get all community colleges and universities in that Cincinnati-Dayton corridor, pretty much just straight up an interstate connecting all of the schools together. We'd like to all be a part of this. So again, even if you're interested in seeing what schools in your area have designations, I also have a link there too that'll actually take you out there for the entire list of current schools that are designated through this process. There's a link provided there. Again, these centers are broken down into areas. They're kind of, and I kind of have this huge across the screen here. So they're broken down into these areas or these centers. Now the centers have resources, or they might be able to connect you to a school that's like right next to you to work on different things. What's nice about this as well is knowing all the schools in this area, you can then have them attend different events. Take for instance, I was doing an event here at Sinclair, and I have my other schools that are CAEs participate in a K-12 activity. Well, when we go to redesignate, all of those activities go in your other institutional criteria. So we're able to help each other out, especially when we apply or redesignate. We're helping each other out in our local areas and districts. Because really, the more schools in your area that have this, the better. So again, the CAE community website, it's caecommunity.org. This is a great website that's got a whole lot of resources. It's got a lot of information on it. It's got links to designations and institutions. I believe this is ran out of Cal State San Bernardino with Tony Colson. I believe that it's a part of the project that they're working on there. But this has been a great resource to have. It even has links to events and other things that are going on in that CAE community. All right. So I'm going to take a deep breath and move on to the actual starting the process. Again, I hope to kind of just give a high-level view of this. As you can imagine, going through the process and working with other schools through the process and having other calls, I just talked last week at the National Institute of, let's see, that's next week is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. But last week I was at the National Science Foundation Conference at ATE talking about designating and the process. So I do want to just kind of touch on this, talk about the process, what this entails, and view some different areas. Again, I have links to all of the information to dive deeper into it. So the thing that everybody worries about the most, because it's probably the most time-consuming piece of this, is mapping all of your courses and your course content to knowledge units. Now, my friend Fred Kaplinger actually wrote a mapping guide, and this guidebook kind of describes everything, walks you through. I have a link to his new mapping guide with a new process in it in these slides. And essentially, there's a whole bunch of different knowledge units that you have to map your institution or what you already have in your program, or maybe even create things in your program to meet this designation. Now, this is fairly time consuming because each knowledge unit has about 10 to 15 sub-knowledge units. For instance, if you discuss networking, well, do you discuss IPv4? Do you discuss IPsec? And you have to narrow down into each of those areas, discussing, yes, we do teach IPsec. We teach it in week 4 with this homework and this quiz and this midterm. And you kind of have to map it all down individually. So that's probably the most time-consuming piece of this. And I wanted to show a chart. Now, like I mentioned before, I think we have several schools on here. So this chart shows everything from associates to bachelor's to master's to the doctorate level. A lot of the CAER's research are in the PhD master degree related fields. So I kind of wanted to show this all the way through and hope that I can explain it here a little bit. As you can see with the associates and bachelor's level, you see that blue band that says Cybersecurity Foundation CAEUs. Now the 3 there is the point system, or the knowledge unit point system. So take for instance, everyone has to do the Cybersecurity Foundational CAEUs. And I have a map. Well, of course, you can see the CAEUs here at the bottom. The foundational CAEUs are Cybersecurity Foundations, Cybersecurity Principles, IT and System Components. The next level is Technical Core. As you can see, there's technical and non-technical core that goes throughout all the associates and bachelors. This gets back into why they took away that 2Y, is because if we're meeting all these same knowledge units through a bachelor's degree, it just makes sense just to have a CD designation. And then there's optional CAEUs. There's optional CAEUs that you can do in forensics. I think there was a healthcare optional unit, which is really nice because take, for instance, if all of the community colleges, let's say here in Southern Ohio, apply for the CAE, it would be really nice. Take, for instance, we have a forensics program, digital forensics program. I can designate my digital forensics program to be separate from everyone else's because I have this option, this separate program that I can apply for that makes me just a little bit different than my surrounding partners. I have not done this yet, but I think it's a great opportunity. And as you can see across that, you see all the purple areas. You can apply for these additional, or let's say if you have a secure programming piece, well, you can have optional CAEUs for those centers. So those are different options that you can be designated in. But for the most part, everyone all across associates, bachelor's, master's, and doctorate, you have to meet all of those beginning fundamentals, technical core, and non-technical core programs. All right, so if we were to break those out kind of as a list, there's 13 areas there. So that's cybersecurity foundations, principles, components, basic cryptography, basic networking, and so on. So if we were to look at each individual one of those, each one of those then is broken down even further. I believe I have an Excel. Let's see if I can do an Alt tab here. I have an Excel document. Whoa, that's really small. That you can kind of see how these are broken down. So I have basic scripting and programming, and you can see everything that you would have to narrow down to. Here's the definition, the topic, and then you can see the competency and the KSA. So essentially, I need knowledge of low-level computing languages, knowledge of programming language, structure, and logic. I would need to show where I'm doing that in my program in order to be designated. Now, there's a whole lot of things here that I have to make sure that I am meeting to get my designation. So again, this is just one of the 13 pieces. Again, here's cyber defense. Here inside of cyber defense with all the KSAs, I would need to make sure that I have knowledge of data backups, type of backups. Here's skill, knowledge of anti-forensics tactics, skills on identifying forensic footprints. These are all things that are in that cyber defense piece. So even intro to cryptography, IT concepts. This one's got a little bit less, but just skill in conducting information searches, basic skill in basic operations for computers, knowledge of critical analysts, microprocessors. These are probably some things that we do in our entry-level classes. Again, the idea of trying to be designated is not to try to designate a whole lot of classes. For instance, we were able to map all of these competencies to 4 classes. I know that sounds crazy, but when you actually start breaking down what you teach in your class, looking at all the outcomes, the A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus probably touch on 70 to 80% of all of the topics in that core area that's in that foundations and technical and non-technical KUs. It's able to touch on just about all of those pieces, because if you think about the Security Plus, it touches on cryptography, networking, defense, threats, planning and management. It touches on each of those pieces. It even gets into the policy, legal, and ethics piece. Take, for instance, if you're weak in one of these areas, it's absolutely fine to create a new homework concept that helps with this. So take, for instance, when I was working through this, I noticed that our students were not really working with databases or trying to search for critical information. So I created a homework where the students have to go out and find the CVE for a specific router that had a vulnerability that somebody was able to break into it. So I have students research, an event that happened. They have to go and find critical information through databases, through use of searching, through use of collecting information, then actually write up a report on how that attack happened, how that individual got in, and assess it, and then write up how you would mitigate that program. So that one homework document was able to touch on multiple knowledge units. And I hope everybody's kind of following me with that, because I lacked that. I did not have something like that in my program, but I added that to my Security Plus class, just in addition to the other homeworks and outcomes that we had. So just to provide just a little bit more information on how to map, I have these 3 links in here. I believe all of this is going to change with a new software they're going to use for designation. So I'm just going to leave these in here on approaching to mapping and gathering and course editing and all that kind of stuff. However, this may go away or be kind of older. I was going to remove it, but the information in it is great. However, just keep in mind that they are kind of moving away from this older approach. These are actually links to walkthroughs on how to gather the data, where does it belong, how do you fill it out, what fields do you need to fill out, and so on. So that kind of is a very, very light view of the KU process. Now, I hope that made sense and just kind of touching on some of those lightly. Again, each of those in that Excel document, each knowledge outcome needs to be broken down. You saw how it mapped to the NICE standard on the other side. I believe there's 52 different job roles in the NICE framework, and then those map to the individual classes. So that's kind of how they're mapping both at the same time, about where all of those outcomes meet those skill sets. So let's talk about all of the other areas of the CAE. So there's 7 criteria. Now inside of this criteria, then it's broken down even further and even further with what's required in here. But take, for instance, this is the cyber defense curriculum path. So everything that you put together for the KUs, student skill development and assessment, you have to have a designated center. Now that center can be virtual or it can be physical. You have to have qualified faculty to teach those courses. Take, for instance, here at Sinclair, I have 2 faculty with PhDs in cyber defense. My master's in cyber defense, and both of them have their CISSP and CYSA and all of the other ones. So they had to have those in order to be a practicing institution. Again, your institution has to have an entire institutional security plan. You even have to upload the resume of your CISO. So make sure that that is something that you have, make sure that that's something that you can attain, and have that good relationship with that individual, because some of the criteria is even making sure that students on campus have an awareness of things. Take, for instance, here at Sinclair, we have a PC repair shop where our students can take their PCs to be worked on, to have viruses removed, and they do general PC maintenance and care and education to Sinclair students and faculty. So we were able to put action plans and handouts and things in that. It's a free service, but we have like our customer service and our A+ students run that lab, and they hand out things to students and stuff. So that became a part of our institutional action plan. Then the other piece is what I was talking about before, that outreach and collaboration beyond the institution. If I just sit here and say, hey, Sinclair, I'm not going to hand anything out. I'm not going to send anything. I'm just going to sit here to be here by myself. It's not going to work out very well, because that outreach collaboration is great. Like I mentioned before, I do a lot with Columbus State and Clark State and Wright State, where I just submitted a co-grant with the University of Cincinnati to do scholarship for service stuff, all through this program. And I actually got to meet all of those people through this designation, through this program, and through these pieces, because that outreach and collaboration, it even gets into the non-credit side of the house. It wants to know, are you doing like cybersecurity for seniors? We have an individual here that teaches in the Center of Lifelong Learning, runs a couple classes every year, especially during the holidays, about keeping yourself secure, making sure you check your bank accounts, change your passwords, all that kind of stuff. So we have all of those in that cyber outreach collaboration beyond the institution. Now, again, each of these are broken down even further. These are just the 7 overlaying program criteria. So if you can imagine, if the KU process is just one of these, all of these consist of quite a bit of information. One of the biggest things the NSA tries to do, especially with this program, is make sure that your institution is on board. Because one of the first things they're going to ask you as soon as you apply is that you have a letter from your president about being a designated institution. They want to make sure that they are aware of this program. Also, as a side note, the NSA wants a lot of collaboration and work at the higher levels of the institution. So they put together what is called the ELF, the Executive Leadership Forum, where they invite all college presidents and deans out to a conference every year to talk about this collaboration between institutions, the cyber warfare as it stands in jobs and abilities like that. Last year, it was in Coastline Community College in Florida. I believe this year it is at Moraine Valley Community College next to Chicago. And again, if you're a designated institution, your president, dean, or whatever will be sent an email expected to attend an event like this. For instance, here at Sinclair, my dean and provost are normally involved in something like this. So again, there are 7 different areas, program requirements. Please keep in mind that the link that I have here just goes to the community college page. If you go back to the iad.gov.nietp documents page, it's got the 4-year universities, it's got the research and all that kind of stuff. So if you were to click on this link, it's only going to take you directly to the program requirements for the 2-year designation or just for the foundational information. All right, and then just to kind of wrap a few things up, why would I do this? Why would I apply? Why would I want to be involved in this this program? Well, there's a lot of information. I have a link up here at the top. It's the Cybersecurity National Action Plan. This is actually something that President Obama put into place. Well, with this presidential action, it opened up a whole bunch of money for grants for only CAE schools. With that said, we applied for an equipment grant. We were able to get about $300,000, which rebuilt 2 entire classrooms. And it also got us an opportunity to be a part of a new building that Sinclair had purchased to actually design a cyber defense center. So we were able to apply for that. I just got word again that there's going to be another $38 million that should be released anytime for schools that have a CAE. It's a little bit different than working on a grant for the National Science Foundation. It's set up a little bit differently. It's kind of involved a little bit different because you would actually be getting the grant directly from the NSA and not from the National Science Foundation. Also, Sinclair Community College is a part of the pilot program for the Scholarship for Service. I don't know if anyone's aware of the Scholarship for Service program. It's an amazing program where students are actually scholars. They get paid to go to school and do nothing but go to school. They get all their tuition paid. They get an allowance. They get $10,000 in travel. They get $10,000 in discretionary funds. So essentially, here at Sinclair, our 2-year program, the student gets about $150,000. And remember, we're only $99 a credit hour, so that's a pretty good chunk of money for students. We're piloting that right now as a community college. That program was available for schools and universities in 2002. We're going to be piloting that. We have our first 4 students in the program. They started at the beginning of fall here. And they're going to be going throughout this 2-year program to do nothing but work on their programs and their schooling, and then they have to work for the federal government once they complete. Now, the reason that we got to be a part of this is we are a CAE institution. I believe that in the other institutions that we applied for the grant with are also CAEs, and I even believe that the sub-participants were also CAE schools that got to be a part of this pilot. Also, Sinclair is working on the ABET pilot. ABET, the computer science side of the house, is going to start accrediting community colleges. They're also going to take a look at CAE schools, so we're piloting the first ever ABET community college associate degree programs. So we're excited to be a part of that. Also, the CAE community is great to just generally be a part of. As a Center of Academic Excellence Principal Investigator, or PI, or whoever at your college is designated to be over the piece, they actually get to be involved in some of the symposiums and things going on. So here in a couple weeks, we'll be out at the NICE NIST conference, and as a part of that conference, they're having the CAE Symposium, where it brings in all of the centers, the CAE CDs, the Rs, the cyber ops, the COs, will all come together, and we'll hear from the NSA and other institutions and collaborate together. It's a great thing to be a part of. It's a great thing to bring everybody into, meet new people, and to work on other things. So with that said, Adam, I will turn it back to you.
Great. Thank you very much. We're very grateful you could share that with us. Couple reminders, just if you wanted to enter into the Cybersecurity Month drawings, use code WEB29K. And then for those who would like to see, obviously this is hosted by TestOut. We provide IT training and courseware for PC repair, networking, cybersecurity, among other topics. If you ever want to take a look at our products, go over to testout.com/access. Questions, if you have questions, enter them into the panel on the GoToWebinar taskbar that says questions, and we'll go ahead and answer some of those. For all of those who did ask, I forgot to mention, we will have a recording of this presentation, and these slides are hosted on Google Slides this time, so that we'll send out a link that allows you to view the slides, see all of the links, click through. And another fun piece of information, I did get the question of, when you go to that iad.gov website, you do, even though it is a cybersecurity site for doing Center of Excellence, it does give you a security risk concern disclaimer. So if you are on Firefox or Chrome, I know both of those, it gives you a security alert. Go through the advanced option, allow it as an exception. I've been on the website a lot of times to see the resources and haven't had my credit card details stolen yet. So it's kind of funny that it is a cybersecurity application that is not on a secure website, but that's the .gov does that sometimes. All right, so we do have one question here that you went over briefly the benefits of the organization becoming a CAE school. What are some of the benefits that students get out of going to a school that has the NSA designation?
Sure. So I think the biggest thing that the students get out of going to an NSA designation is that the institution is teaching the most current up-to-date curriculum that aligns with the standards. Now, I'll kind of point out a few things with that. Here in Dayton, Ohio, I am right next to the Air Force Base. Well, being right next to the Air Force Base, they have to follow all of the Department of Defense 8570.01M directive, where they have to meet all of the outlines for all of the certifications and all that kind of stuff. Whenever they point a student to go find information to take classes to work on those certifications, they can point them to Sinclair because we show up as a designated institution for kind of that federal work. One, they know that all of our curriculum is aligned to all of the NICE NIST framework. So if the NICE framework maps educational skills to the 52 or 53 job roles, they know that they can point students to come over here to take those classes. Now, if you're a current student and you're in one of these classes, you're kind of just say, oh, well, I don't know the difference between being in a CAE designated class and a non-CAE designated class. I think the idea and the purpose is to make sure that everything is mapped to all of the outcomes, so you know that you're touching on all of the areas that it's a government requirement to know to fill a position. So I'm not just saying that just the government in the area, but of course, being here in Dayton, a lot of our students get jobs working at the contractors. Well, contractors like Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, their offices are 2 blocks away. They also have the same requirements. So again, being a CAE school maps us to those requirements. And then a lot of the just local independent companies in the area are happy that we meet all those KUs, because it's almost like we have a rigid standard, then we touch on those for the designation. And then I bring my companies in to let them know. Like I have them look over the KUs, like I show them what we're working on, so it's kind of a hands-on piece. And, running a business advisory meeting and saying, hey, you're helping us map the knowledge units to the KUs for the federal government. I've had a lot of businesses get excited about that.
Perfect. I had a couple questions about the high school level, whether this can be done at a career center. As far as I know, there is not an option for the K-12 level. Is that correct?
As far as I understand, that is correct. However, what we do here at Sinclair is we have a College Credit Plus program and a Tech Prep program that actually uses our A+, Network Plus, Security Plus classes in that program. And we have that all mapped to a short-term certificate. So essentially what we do is we get students like 80% through it at our career tech centers. And then when they come here, they might have to take, an additional server class, because we have a server class that we have to like rack and install and harden servers and do an attack against them. They might need to take that class to finish their CAE. And from what I understand, that's about as close as they're able to get to it. And I would really suggest, reaching out to the community college or the university in the area and see if they can start implementing that together. Because like I mentioned, I think we have 5 or 4 classes that are in our designation, and like 3 of them are like Network Plus, Security Plus, A+.
Okay. Great. And then a couple questions coming through on samples, on schools that have applied, maybe not gotten cleared due to things such as letters of intent or instructional security plans. Do you know if there are resources that have samples of those who have been accepted, and a good example of what you need to provide for that requirement?
Of the schools that did not get accepted, or?
So maybe a school that didn't get accepted that's looking for a resource to see, okay, they said I was deficient in this document or this plan. Is there a sample plan they can look at to see what the NSA is looking for?
Yeah, so I did the same thing. I reached out to our CRRC because I was concerned about that same thing. Like, let's say, one of the things I was nervous about, because it's completely out of my control, is whether my institution had an information security, program. I mean, I can't really do anything about that. I'm a faculty member, so it's not like I can walk over to IT and say, hey, I need you to do this. So I was concerned about that. So I asked, I was a part of that C5 process, and I asked if I could see other institutionals' information. And what my person told me was, well, you can reach out, to that other institution in that area to see if they'll share. And that's what I kind of used my CRC for. Like, I reached out and they were like, oh yeah, well, here's our institutional plan. And we just got our designation, read over our institutional plan and see if it matches yours. And I kind of did that with multiple things, right? Because I didn't know if we were doing enough community outreach. I didn't know if I was doing enough of those pieces. So having that C5 mentor that, reviewed all of my work, read through everything. My person's name was Al Heatonkeeper, and he spent hours and days helping me read over everything, vet it all out. And of course, it's not a guarantee, when they do all that. But I know it is a huge resource. I think the NSA has invested a lot of time, effort, and money in making sure that this mentor process kicks off well.
Great. And I do have quite a few questions that have come through that might be organization specific. I see your email is right there on the screen. Are you okay with some of these being emailed to you, putting it out there to answer some of these specific questions?
Sure, I don't mind. I get a little over 300 to 500 emails a day, so
Oh,
so like a month or two, if that's okay with, I'm more than happy to help out.
great. And so you said the CRRC schools are also a great resource because they're there in place to help other schools get through this process, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yes,
So
yeah,
that's
and
another resource for you.
sure, yeah, and earlier I had that list of areas to reach out to and stuff. Like I said, I'm more than happy to help out, send my stuff. My stuff is actually under the old curriculum, the old KU standard, because they changed it the year after. So I still, like, if people would like to see my stuff, that's cool. But my stuff is now in this 2017 designation cycle, not the 2019 when they changed it again.
Okay.
So that's something to keep in mind too.
Okay, perfect. And then just to wrap up with this one, there's a few questions about TestOut curriculum. I put in the comments page that my email, I do have a mapping document that goes over how TestOut courses apply to the KUs for the program. My email is akeys, A-K-E-Y-S, at testout.com. So if you need that, email me, I'll get it sent out to you. And if you have any other questions, I can try to find the answer, knowing that I am not an expert on this designation. I also have had a couple questions come through today and other days about how TestOut is accepted in this program, and we don't have a say in that. There is no curriculum approval process. It is all on the school level. So we can't reach out and prove to them that specific labs count as a certain qualification for it. That's not an option for us. So what we do, provide everything we can to help you with your mapping, but as for becoming, say, a Center of Academic Excellence approved courseware, that's not a program that is offered. So again, we're going to wrap up here. Thank you very much to Kyle for getting this information out. We will send out the link to these slides that have all of the clickable links that help you go through it. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out to myself or Kyle. If Kyle doesn't get back to you with how many emails he gets, I'll try to point you in a direction that's helpful.
Yes.
And again, we'll send out this, and there is a quick 4-question survey as soon as we end this. But thank you very much, Kyle. Thank you for all of those that attended, and we look forward to continuing to provide these types of webinars for you.
Yeah. Yes, definitely.
Bye-bye.
Bye.